This is Cwm Idwal National Nature Reserve, and we're right by the edge of Cwm Idwal, which is in the centre of Cwm Idwal. It is managed in partnership between the National Trust, National Park and Natural Resources Wales. We work in partnership because we've got common goals and we're trying to find the perfect balance between conservation and recreation. The boundary of the National Nature Reserve extends up the Gribin and it goes up to Glitterfawr, it comes back down Llyn y Cwn, then it goes over the Garn and comes down Ysgwydd the Garn past the lake shore here up to the edge of the lake behind me.
Cwm Idwal is one of the best examples, if not the best examples, of a geological landscape and a glacial landscape in the UK. It's the best teaching tool when you bring people up here to teach them about the basics of geology and how the whole landscape was formed by volcanoes initially, hundreds of millions of years ago, and subsequently the ice exposing everything here. The geology in Cwm Idwal lends itself to being a fantastic place for a variety of plant life. Some of the species you find here are typical of upland sites. However, other species are here because of the less acidic rocks that are to be found here. And these are Arctic alpine species that we'll have a look at.
The geology we have here and the botany makes it an excellent outdoor classroom. Down the bottom by Llyn Ogwen, we've got the interpretation room run by the partnership and both Llyn Ogwen Cottage run by the National Trust. It is estimated that 125,000 people come here each year, and that includes educational groups from all over the UK. The first warden for the National Nature Reserve was self-taught quarryman Evan Roberts, and the place is so special it has attracted names like Charles Darwin. Cwm Idwal is a walker's paradise. You've got a number of different walks readily accessible from Cwm Idwal. You can go around the lake, a leisurely walk, or you can go on a more strenuous walk up the Garn or Glitterfawr. Cwm Idwal is also a paradise for climbers. Idwal Slabs here is very popular during the summer months, and Cwm Idwal itself is very popular with winter climbers when the conditions are right in the winter as well. I'm Gito and I'm the Cwm Idwal Partnership Officer. Cwm Idwal is such an amazing place. It deserves a partnership to look after the features we have here. The partnership is made up of the National Trust, Snowdonia National Park Authority and Natural Resources Wales. Each body has its own responsibilities outside of Cwm Idwal, but in Cwm Idwal they take a lead on different aspects. For example, the National Trust here take a lead on the maintenance of footpaths and access.
I'm Dewi Davis and I work for the Snowdonia National Park Authority, one of the partners on the Cwm Idwal Partnership. And we take the lead on aspects such as recreation, access and education, helping people understand why this place is special.
The third partner in the partnership is Natural Resources Wales, which look after the plant life and the ecology of the site, and I work closely with Hywel Roberts. We want to try and encourage people who can come up to Cwm Idwal to come up to Cwm Idwal. This is why we design paths like we have behind me. We try to make paths of people available for people of all abilities. These are stone pitched paths, which are a feature we see in the Highlands. The stone is carried by helicopter here and pitched in the traditional method. By making suitable paths, we keep people on the paths rather than on the sensitive habitats we have either side.
I often bring groups of school children and college students up here, including a lot of societies who want to learn about the place. And one of the main things that I talk about, because it's of interest to me, is the geology here. It's exceptional in Cwm Idwal, and it's a fantastic example of a volcanic landscape that's been folded and mashed up over hundreds of millions of years and has been subsequently exposed by the work of glaciers. One of the places I start any trip of the kind is here next to the Darwin boulders. We call them the Charles Darwin boulders because Charles Darwin actually came here on a couple of occasions to study initially the geology of the site, but then subsequently to look at the effects of ice and the ice ages and glaciers on the landscape. The Darwin boulders are a series of boulders in this location that were basically dropped. Well, the current theory is that they were dropped through a crevasse in the glacier as one boulder. Following the recession of the glaciers, the work of freeze-thaw took them to pieces basically, and that's a process still happening today. One of the remarkable features of Cwm Idwal is the fold at the back end of the Cwm, which was caused by massive forces in the Earth's crust, pushing layers of volcanic rock together. And of course here, it's all been exposed by the work of the glaciers. What we see in front of us here are glacial moraines, which are deposits left behind by the glacier. Cwm Idwal was designated because of its geological importance, and these moraines are very significant and very prominent features here.
Because the moraines are so important, they have been fenced off, and as a byproduct, as it were, it's excluded sheep from an earlier point than the main nature reserve itself. And as we can see, by looking down on the moraine, you can see dry heath communities coming in, species associated with that kind of community, bilberry, heather, holly you can see coming in as well, and rowan. We try to keep sheep out from Cwm Idwal, and we've been trying to do so since 1999. It's a sheep exclusion experiment. Because there are no physical boundaries around the edge of the nature reserve, we employ the services of a local shepherd, whose job is to monitor the site for sheep numbers and keep them out, acting in a way like a bouncer. Cwm
Idwal's got all the habitats and plants that you'd expect in any upland site of this nature. One of the most remarkable ones, and a particular favourite of mine, is the butterwort. It's an insectivore, and it has to be because of the lack of nutrients in the soil that it grows upon. It actually traps insects and digests them to increase the nitrogen it gets. But this is a different type of plant that you'd find to the plants that are higher up, where the geology is different. It's less acidic rock higher up, so we'll go and have a look at the Arctic alpine plants that we find there. So we've climbed up slightly higher now to the back of Cwm Idwal, just below Twlldy or Devil's Kitchen. Behind me, Cwm Idwal, and then further on, Llyn the lakes there. Behind me over this shoulder, we've got some classic examples of Arctic alpines. We've got the moss campion and the roseroot, both very special plants, and they're here mainly because of the geology of the rock underneath. It's slightly less acidic than what's around us. These Arctic alpine plants, they make the most of a very short window of opportunity up here in the uplands. So they tend to come into flower earlier, which is around about now, early June. Come back in a couple of months' time and you'll see the plants lower down, the heathers and the bog asphodels in swathes of purple and yellow.
We're here now in August and we can see a big difference in what we saw earlier. Most of the Arctic alpine plants are past their best now. But what we can see is a massive increase in flowering of the dry and wet heath plants, in other words, the heather communities. Grazing was removed from here approximately 20 years ago. If you look around, you can see how the impact of grazing has an effect on the vegetation. Immediately adjacent to us is a grazed area. This is the mountain of Blaen and Ant. Sheep graze this area and cattle graze it. But once we go into Cwm Idwal, you'll see that there is very little sheep grazing and no cattle grazing, and there is a major change in the vegetation. Here I am now on my knees in the middle of a wet heath. In the middle here we've got bell heather, Erica cinerea. In an adjacent area we've got ling, that's Erica tetralix. Here we have some heather recovery. There's heather, that's Calluna vulgaris. In amongst the heather we've got Narthecium ossifragum, in other words, bog asphodel. What we've got at the moment is just the seed heads, but the occasional flower head as well. If we have a look carefully at the bog asphodel, we can see the reason why it is named in Welsh llafn y bladur. We'll take a leaf from the plant. Pladur is a scythe. Have a look at the shape of that. It looks just like a scythe. I'm now standing in a sea of purple, in sea of mature Calluna vulgaris and other heathland species. What a change that has occurred here in the last 20 years. 20 years ago, this slope was nothing but grassland, inverted commas, with a certain amount of other plants in it, and hardly an indication of Calluna and the dry heathland that we've got here now. What we've got here is a classic example of a base-rich rock, in other words, a rock with less acidity than the majority of upland rocks, and it's giving an opportunity for a range of plants to occur. Also amongst the range of plants we've got some extremely rare ones, such as tufted saxifrage. We've also got maidenhair spleenwood in the background there and many mosses. The concern for me here is that in this particular location this very rare plant, tufted saxifrage, appears to be getting outcompeted by the mosses that are occurring on the same rock. Are the mosses thriving as a reduction of sheep grazing or as a reduction in public pressure, or a combination of reduction in public pressure, sheep grazing and also external climatic and environmental factors? But that plant is going to suffer very soon with competition. We're now at the base of Cwm Idwal, adjacent to Twlldy, the Devil's Kitchen. We're on the steep slopes of Devil's Kitchen at the western end of Cwm Idwal. This is the highlight of any visit to Cwm Idwal, to look at montane and Arctic alpine plants. We're a little bit past the best time of the year for seeing these plants now in August. We've got ox-eye daisy, that big white flower in the background there. We've got knapweed there as well. We've also got examples of lady's mantle in the area. We've also got mountain sorrel, several typical mountain plants. Those on the crag face here are flowering and in very good condition. What we'd like to see here is those very same plants expanding their population onto the level below us here. Unfortunately, at the base of the crag, what we've got are 2 or 3 factors affecting them, namely public pressure trampling on the ground, but also sheep grazing to a low level and feral goat grazing. So there's no chance for those plants to survive long enough to produce seed. I've been extremely fortunate and very grateful to the fact that I've been working here for almost 30 years. I've been here to experience vast changes, especially the more recent one of removal of sheep grazing from the whole site. This is really giving an opportunity for recovery of some of the most important habitats in the uplands of Britain. And Cwm Idwal is a fantastic site to come and experience and view those features. Please come here, appreciate them, enjoy them, take away only memories.
On the gripping behind me, which is on the skyline, there are fossils of brachiopods. These are creatures that lived under the sea 400 million years ago. 12,000 years ago, it was the end of the glacial period where the ice went away. About 6,000 to 8,000 years ago, the late Mesolithic period, we've got evidence of the human inhabitants of Cwm Idwal, which have left artefacts and they have left place names, surviving place names. Cwm Idwal National Nature Reserve has been here for 60 years, which in the grand scheme of things is a blink of an eye. We've done so much in that 60 years in terms of conservation, education and recreation. Today, looking forward, we'll try and develop those areas, and we'll use Bwthyn Ogwen Cottage to further develop education, recreation and conservation for future generations.